episode 4. Episode 4 already. We've made it this far. We've stuck to it. I'm so proud of us.
I know, me too. Who knew we could do it?
Oh, hot damn.
Wait till we get to
Um,
episode 8. It'll be even more fun.
it will. It'll just, everything will come naturally. All right. Episode 4. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to Something to Complain About. I'm T, and I'm
I'm
here with my
A.
co-host, A. How are
I'm
you,
A.
A?
I'm good. How
You
are
are
you?
A. I am good, but oh boy, do I have a story for you.
Ooh, let's hear it.
Okay, so, and that actually kind of brings us to today's topic, which I do not know about all these poor babies, but there is a term, and I'm seeing it more and more often. And they're called NEET. They're not
NEETs?
employment, NEET, NEET, not
Yeah.
in employment, education, or training.
Huh.
And,
I saw that article. That was interesting.
back in the day, I was talking with my T here earlier,
Yeah.
and he goes, "Needs, what are those?" And I go, "Well, when we were growing up, or several years ago, this is who we would call the basement dwellers."
Yes.
um, which is insulting. But what this is an article from Yahoo that I think initially was published in, was it Finance?
Yeah.
Yahoo
Yeah.
pulled
Yahoo
it
Finance
from it.
published it.
Okay, and then it was pulled from another, maybe from Fortune. Shoot, let me look here, because they actually pulled it from, yes, it
Yep.
was originally featured on Fortune.com as well.
Yeah.
That um, all of these young 20-year-olds, the number of NEETs among this population is growing, and not just in the US, but globally.
Yeah.
All We have a significant number of young people who are not going to college. They're not looking for a job. They don't have a job, and they're not in any kind of like job training.
Yeah. I think what's
And
interesting about this is when you first read this article, when I first read the article, I'll just be honest, there's an initial sort of flash of disdain and a little bit of anger, right? Like
well,
I'll be honest, I get judgmental quick. So I got judgmental. But I think the more you think through it, these are not necessarily basement dwellers because of the same reasons, right? Like
right.
the people that we're thinking of from our generation that were basement dwellers, they're also the people who correct me if I'm wrong here, but I see these as the same people who would be graduated but still hanging out at the high school parties, spending all their time at home, all that other stuff. And we kind of saw them, maybe rightly or wrongly, as losers and lazy, right? Like they didn't want to go to school, they didn't want to go to find a job, or maybe they did find a job, but it was, they're just all that's all they're doing. Just living at
Mm,
home, leeching off mom and dad, that kind of thing. I think what's interesting about that is there's a lot of presupposition to that, right? Like, as I think about it, we were sold, and I do mean sold, the idea that we had to go to college, like had to. I think we've talked about this already, and we will probably talk about it 100 more times in other episodes because this is sort of quintessential
Because we're,
Gen X reality, right?
we're,
We were
we're still
just told,
processing.
right,
Yes, we're still
that there's not
processing.
enough therapy, vodka, or weed in the world for that trauma. But like, we were all convinced we had to go to school. Like, you have to go to school or you have to go to trades. You have to do something. But it was really the
But,
focus was initially, it
well,
was sort of hierarchical, right? It was like university,
right.
maybe community college if you couldn't do university. And we had some people, all right, there were people in my class that I can think of, lovely people who just did not have the academic acumen to handle university, so they would go to like, to your school or whatever, which I think that is also different now. Or some would go to the army, the military in some fashion or another. Others would literally just go to work, but they would go to work like for real. Not many
Right.
people sat around and did nothing. But like, we had this whole push, right? Go to school, do this, get a job, plan for retirement, all these things, get a house. Like, even today you'll hear people talk about how like the the thing that is most common among middle class Americans who become wealthy is that they have a paid off house, right? Harder and
Yeah.
harder to do some of these things. So I think when we look at these people, this the article talks about it being a fifth, right? A fifth of people between the ages of 15 and 24, at least in 2023. That's 20%.
Yeah.
That's 20%. That seems like I don't know how to compare this to something else because I don't really know what the numbers have always been, and those would be interesting to
Yeah.
see. But like, this seems crisis level, at least in my
Well,
head. But it also seems like it's for very different reasons. These people aren't necessarily wanting to not go do stuff, but like, education, they're looking at all of us, I think, who are still trying to pay off our student loans, right? Because we're in that generation where the generation before us could go to school for a hamburger and a pack of fries a week or something stupid, right? And they
and we're
could get a 4 year
talking,
degree.
and we're not talking 2024 prices either
No,
for
no, no.
that hamburger and fries.
Right. Yeah.
But you bring up a great point because when you're talking about, like when we were in our late teens, early 20s, and we were talking about, like the quote unquote losers or whatever, the people who opted out for whatever reason out of that life script that we you know we were all sold a bill of goods, I think is the old saying, right?
Yes, that's
But
exactly right.
what struck me when you mentioned that, and I even took a note, is what we're seeing now is not so much that lack of ambition, but something's inhibiting that ambition, I would imagine. I mean, I can't imagine too many young adults just completely checking out with absolutely no goals, no nothing. I mean, there has to be, I would imagine, an undercurrent of ambition and maybe some passion, or maybe they used to be goals, but maybe they can't be goals, so now they're hopes.
Yeah.
But there's something going on because I just can't see so many people all of a sudden just going, oh, I give up without something pressing um, into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think that's also what this study is kind of telling us. I don't think we had a lot of good reasons for people. Here's this is my suspicion about the people who we would have called basement dwellers. And this is literally just, I'm pulling this out of the dark space and I'm just going to take a guess. I think most of those people likely had some type of learning disability that was either undiagnosed or untreated, and that made
Mm.
school extremely difficult for them. They barely got through. It was traumatic when they went through. It stunted their psychological, social development, and they kind of just got stuck. Um, that's my guess. Because some of them that I know,
Well,
I think if we had the tools then that we have today, they would be diagnosed either with a learning disability or they would be diagnosed on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, and there would be other resources to help them be more successful. But I think in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, when we were going through school, that was just not the way it worked. So I think a
no.
lot of them may have gotten stuck in that realm. But like for people today, that's not really so much the case, right? We've got a lot of support in most places for kids with learning disabilities. Even when I was teaching in 2001 and 2002, we didn't have as much support for learning disabilities when I was teaching high schoolers then as
Mhm.
exists now. So I think they've got that kind of support, but I think when they look at us, I think we're the reason that they're looking at us and they're looking at what our lives have become. So this is where the complaint about is going to be real here. Um, I think they're looking
And
at
we're
us and they're thinking, when do we get to swear on YouTube? Is there a time limit or a date or
well, I think it's so many minutes in, and I can always go back and do like a horse
a
and over.
bloop?
But
I think they're
okay,
looking at
think
us and going, what the absolute freak are, why would we want to do this? Because think about what it costs for us to go to school where we went to school.
well, but hold on a second because you bring up a fabulous point. They're looking at us, but think about when we were their age and we saw everything that the generation ahead of us got.
Yes, they did.
That was our motivation, wasn't it?
It was our
You
motivation,
know,
right? Our parents had
yeah,
houses. Even
yeah.
even
So
parents like did your mom own a house or did she rent?
she ended up owning a house for a while. So
Yeah.
yeah, my mom, single parent,
Think about
no
that.
college education, got a house. I mean, she eventually lost it, but I mean, she held on to that house long enough for us to I she had it for 10, 12 years. So she
Remind me,
raised us in it.
I should know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask because I can't remember. Your mom did at some point get some post high school education.
Yes. She did a
She was a nurse.
a 1 year
Yeah,
LPN program.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like my mom did initially, she graduated with a bachelor's in secondary education. And then my dad dropped out. They went to the same school. My dad dropped out. He never graduated. Um, Mostly because he was too interested in like marrying my mom, I guess. The Mom never taught high school, even though that was her first degree. Her second
Mhm.
degree was in elementary education, early childhood development, because at the time where we lived, the only jobs that were coming open were elementary. So the school board in our town literally said, look, if you get your elementary certification, we'll hire you because we're going to need you. And so that's what she did. So she is one of the
Mhm.
probably the few people out there who has degrees in both elementary and secondary ed. Um, but if you think about money, right? Like our parents were at least able to own a house. My mom did not work until both my brother and I were in school. Like she stayed at home. She did babysit other kids if you want to think about that like as an extra income, but it wasn't a lot. Otherwise, they were able to buy a house just on what my dad made driving
Yeah.
a milk truck. That's what my dad
Well,
did until 1987, right? So
and so
they
in
had it, and I mean, we looked at them and thought, because they were really like, you got to go to school, you can get a good job,
mhm,
all that stuff, right? Good retirement, good whatever, work for a pension, et cetera, whatever it is. And then we were motivated to do that. And we go to school, and the price of education starts to explode. So, like, my first year at the university you and I went to, because so in case our listeners want to know, T and I went and graduated from the same university. That's where we met. Back in 1998. Uh, so we're going on almost 30 years here. The
God,
it was
30 years.
it was $18,000 a year. We went to a
Yeah.
private school. I had a presidential scholarship, which paid for a quarter of that. Um,
A bully for
I just
you.
Googled it because I was curious when you were talking a
Oh,
little bit
what?
a few minutes ago. I was really curious, like, what's the current cost of tuition? And at the same school to go to as undergraduate currently, and this is actually, I suppose, not super current because it was for this 2022 to 2023 school year.
Okay.
$45,590 is the
So,
was the cost of a year at the same university that we went to just this past year. So current, I would imagine the 23-24 school year is higher. 24-25 will also be higher. You're talking 45 to 50. I was at the dentist on Wednesday, and her son is in his just finished his freshman year at Syracuse. These
mhm,
people have money, but his first year at Syracuse was $80,000. So I
mhm,
think kids today are looking at that and going, these these poor people are still paying back their school 30 years later, 20 years later. They may never do it, and we're the ones hoping for some kind of student loan forgiveness. And they're looking at that going, why, why do I want that?
mhm.
And then they're looking at the job
Well,
market and going, holy crap, what's going
and
to happen
and
here?
they're and I think what we're realizing now is with the baby boomer generation, that is our blip on the timeline of humanity. Like, I think we thought
Yes.
everything was going to improve, and they set the new standard for themselves. But now these kids who are, you know, getting into adulthood are kind of like, okay, and at their age, okay, it worked out for grandpa and grandma, but not mom and dad.
Right.
And it didn't work out for mom and dad's friends. And it didn't, and it doesn't help my older sister or my older cousins or my neighbors who are in their 30s. Like they're seeing, um, because I remember just remarks of like, um, and it's still, I think, a true fact. I guess a fact is true. That's redundant. That Gen
It's fine.
X is the first generation to do worse than their parents.
We
And
are.
I've heard that several times where like then we become the butt of the joke because, oh, well, they're such slackers and blah, blah, blah. No, no, no.
Most of
Mm,
us have had to work multiple jobs our entire lives.
right.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I'm gonna sound bitter because I am, but like that's my reality, right? Like,
I I have spent the past 15 years of my career waiting for people who have far fewer credentials than I do to retire so
yeah,
I can move up so that the person 10 years younger than me can move up. You know, and there's people, but at the same time, like I remember one place I worked at, and this was around the time I got my master's, and they were doing mass layoffs. And one person was devastated because she still, she said she had to work. She was already above retirement age.
yeah,
She was a widow. So she was getting her husband's Social Security. Her husband had had a pension. Her husband had had, so she was getting everything he'd had. Um, She had a 4,000 square foot house for one little 68-year-old woman and a new car, but she still had a mortgage.
yeah,
Now, most normal people would go, I'm going to downsize.
yeah.
Little 67-year-old me, I don't need a 4,000 square foot house that I'm paying a mortgage on. I could sell it off, get a house for, or a condo or something. No, last I knew, she was let go. Then she was out trying to find another job.
Right.
So some of these people who are now saying, well, we can't retire. No, you were greedy and your greed is holding up everybody else. So this 67-year-old woman still living in her house, meaning uh, she's got a job that somebody else could have. She's got a
Yeah,
house that a family could have in a
for
housing
sure.
crisis. But, whatever, she got hers.
Yeah, I
And that's
think that's
just one
happening a lot.
example. Yeah.
It's happening a lot. I've actually seen articles and conversations about it, but I didn't think much of it until you just mentioned it. And it's also part of the
Yeah.
reason why we moved here to Chicago, right? Like when my T, there's a lot of T's here. I'm the only A. It's
We
all
have
T's and
so
me.
many T's.
The
Oh, and wait.
the
Well, someday I'll start talking about little baby tea, my mint tea.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, I
So
know.
I mean when we lived in Nebraska and the place my T worked at had their restructuring or whatever you want to call it, and T's job got eliminated. Part of the conversation was, is there a future here? Like
Mhm.
in his, career path and in his work. And he was kind of like, literally, people would have to die or retire. And then there
Yeah.
would be 100 of us trying to get those jobs. So the decision was, okay, we'll look here, but we're also going to look in other places, and there will be better opportunities in places with more firms that do that kind of work. But like that's true in that particular environment. It's also true in a lot of others because some of them I think may have overspent and not done a great job saving for retirement, and so they're stuck.
Yeah.
Others don't want to be bored and like the jobs that they have and want to keep working. And that creates a situation where our
So,
generation can't move into those jobs, which means
and, and
nobody
I
can move into
forgive,
ours.
and I forgive some of that, but like with the example I gave you earlier, she didn't even know how to send email, how to schedule with her email. And
Yeah,
she was a manager, you know. So I can get it because I've seen some people who are older who remain very dynamic and on edge, and the ROI is there.
yeah,
But that whole point of waiting for someone, having to wait literally for someone to either die or retire is so true. Because even in my field, um, I mean, it very much is, and with COVID and stuff, cleaning some out and promote, there were retirements, but then everybody's scrambling for the same positions because, again, we've all been fed we have to have these advanced degrees, we have to have all these credentials, da 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 da. So now the market's flooded with people who actually do have the credentials to do the job and just no outlet for it. Um,
yeah.
and it's
And I
frustrating for us. I can't imagine how a 25-year-old would feel right now.
no, I think it's got to be completely exasperating and debilitating. I'm going to correct what I said earlier. When I said 45,590, that was only tuition. So comparing it to the roughly 19,000 when I started at that university, that was all in. That was housing, tuition,
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So I found the number here. It popped up on the next screen. The total cost is 62,500 if you're living on campus. So the cost of going to that university since I started in 1995, you started in 1995, right?
I
That's
started in
gone up
1995
300
too.
and plus percent, right?
Okay. And here's the thing. If you and I would have graduated from high school this year, I would have never met you because I would have never gone to this university.
Neither would have I. No.
I
I'm still
probably would have been,
paying for having gone to that university, and I will be paying until either somebody forgives the debt or I die. Like I will never pay it off. It's not
You
possible.
and me, brother. You and me, brother. I paid more for that education than I did for any of my graduate education put together.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
And I've gotten buckus for it.
Pretty
Well,
much.
I mean, now you have to call me doctor, but that's not because of that place.
This is
Um,
true. This is true. Yeah. I
but
mean, I
it,
think if I were graduating today, and obviously I don't know because I'm not, but I think I would be disinclined to do it. I think if I had
yeah,
to do it over, I would have gone to a community school, gotten my general
yeah.
eds out of the way, because realizing that it doesn't matter. We used to think it mattered a lot,
Well,
that you did everything
okay,
at a
but
university.
but also in our defense, back then, universities did not have transfer agreements
That's
with.
true.
I mean, they didn't have transfer agreements with anyone, especially like the type of university we went to, because my mom explicitly asked, can if my daughter goes to the local community college for a year to save money on tuition, and right away they're like, nope, we accept no community college transfer credits. Today, now they do, but back then they didn't.
Right.
29 years ago, they were like, no, she gets all her credits here or none at all.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of places were like that. Now, a lot of places are more flexible. But, I think I'd be like you. If I were graduating today, I would still have my job in my hometown. I would go drive the 20 miles to the nearest community college, take fun classes, and, just, kind of keep on doing what I was doing in high school, just being bored and raising hell and working and,
Yeah.
you know,
You'd
but
be
yet
in
still
less
having a good
debt.
time.
Well, I mean, I think
Ah,
that's also like they're looking at the cost of education and they're seeing the damage it has done to their parents and all that stuff,
yeah.
like you mentioned. They look at the issue with the potential jobs. They also look at how we are treated in jobs, right? Like
Yeah.
how demanding those jobs are, how some people are never really not at work, even when they're not at work.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're doing that stuff for little to nothing. Like
You know,
you're
you
stuck
bring
with
up
it and they look at that and go, why do I want to kill myself for I, there's no it
what?
used to be like my T made this comment because his parents both worked at a factory where they had pensions and I think they actually
Mhm.
still do. They're one of the few places that still offers them. But like if you were loyal to the company, your loyalty was
Yeah.
rewarded over the long term. And when we switched in this country from having pension-based systems to 401ks, that was a neat
Yeah.
little trick businesses pulled on everybody. That was about what 1984-ish or 1985. Um, there's no more loyalty. Like actually I read an article the other day and I probably should have sent it to you, but it was about how you have to change jobs every couple years at this
Move
point in time,
ahead.
like in
Yeah.
order to get ahead, partially I think
Yeah.
because of what you mentioned as far as people being in those jobs well into what should have been retirement. And so I think younger people are looking at all that stuff and going, where's the payout? Where's what am I
Well,
even doing it for?
one thing I've noticed with our younger generation or Gen Zers and probably our alphas too, now that they're getting a little bit older, is they really are a very perceptive bunch. And they really do have a way of cutting through the BS. You know,
Yes.
I again I kind of think about like the people who say, because one place that I worked at, well, I mean, so many places I've worked at, but one place I worked at, it was really a big thing to be like, I work 60 hours a week. Okay.
Yeah.
But then when I was the one answering all the phones that go into the office, and the two people who are talking about, oh, I do 70 hours a week, and the other one goes, I do 60. When every phone call gets filtered through my desk, and I'm listening to you talk to your kids for 3 hours a day, and your sister for 2 hours a day, and your mom for half an hour a day, and you call your husband 5 times a day, and the other one's on Skype with her mom 4 times a day. And it's like, you might physically be here 60 hours a week, but you're putting in 20 hours of work, if even that.
Right.
And I think the thing is like, I noticed it. Younger people, they'll notice it, but they'll also say something.
Yeah. And we were too
And
scared to say something because we were afraid
right,
we would not have a job any longer.
right.
This generation doesn't care.
And I think that's okay. Like,
I think it's
I mean,
okay too.
I'm getting to the point too where, just like I heard from somebody the other day, have you found your dream job yet? Okay, first of all, I'm not 10, so no. Um, but
Yeah.
again, and just looking at how the world is and how the world's changing, I'm like, you know, maybe my trajectory isn't the traditional trajectory. Maybe my trajectory is a little bit here, a little bit there. This creative little podcast, my other little side gig, and it's
Yeah.
stuff that I enjoy and that I want to do, and it allows me to express different talents and
Hmm.
um, interests, and maybe that's the way to go. I mean, because what else is there to work forward to? I mean, I already have three retirement plans already going that I pay into. So, um, other than healthcare, what 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 else is there for me to be like? No, I do need to be a slave to the machine for
Yeah.
60 hours a week. And now, being at the age that I am, um, because I am now a woman pushing 50, constantly watching my back because ageism is a thing and sexism is a thing. Um, because there are women just a few years younger than me that that are going to do the same thing. 10 years younger than me, even. What is worth what?
Yeah. Well, I think they even talk about that in other articles that we were looking at too, that um they're looking for ways to monetize their other talents, right? They're
Right.
doing TikToks and they've got followers and stuff like that. They're way better at this than a lot of us because I mean, we grew up without cell phones. We didn't
Right.
have cell phones. We were lucky if we had a remote for our TVs, let's be real honest. Like, we were the remote growing up.
We
Go change a
were.
channel, right? Like, that's how it worked. So this whole idea that they're more tech tuned in, they have more information at their fingertips, which is great. Um, and they just look at it and they think there's no payout here, right? I can find these other things to do, maximize my visibility online, gather followers, do whatever it is that they're doing online to make money, and they can probably make more money than what we make doing traditional jobs. I think what's going to happen, the
Yes.
thing that's going to be interesting to me, we're going to be older, a lot older when this happens, but I think there's going to be a substantial shift in what companies do. Like, we're going to see companies just fail because they won't
Yeah.
be able to hire people until they are willing to pay. Like, these
Yeah.
young people are going to want a significant motivator to come to work, and then whoever's running those companies is going to have to be able to think like the Gen Zers and people after them, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's going to have to be more give and take, and companies aren't good at that in general. So
Uh,
I don't
They're
know what's going
not.
to happen with that.
they're not. And when you look at even just what they call, oh, it all kind of falls under meaningful work, but and it ties into like your return on investment for your degree and is it um and this might have to be another topic, but basically like are you getting paid what you're worth salary wise, but then also benefit wise? And nobody is. And so it is, um, I think I agree with you. It's good. There's going to have to be a shift. And we now have a generation who's kind of like, yeah, we're not going to play this game. Like it worked out well for some, but for most it did not. So we're done playing. We've seen this, because they're already third generation down. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, call bullshit on it
they're,
because it
I mean,
is.
not only do they have the education piece of it that's very difficult and daunting, especially with the amount of money that it costs, the job side of it, like the potential for them to ever own a house, to ever be able, most of them are having to live with other people, either family or multiple roommates at a time, well into their 30s, which is not something you or I ever thought we would have to think about, right? We
Oh,
didn't, if we were going to live with somebody, it was because we were most likely in a relationship with that person and either going to marry them or just live in sin forever. But at the end of the day, we didn't have roommates. Like it just wasn't a thing. And now you've got
no.
4 or 5 people sharing a small apartment. There's nothing for them to
But
look forward to.
but think how common that is though in other countries. To stay living in your parents' house until you are married. And sometimes that is until you're about 30. Or if you do move out, you do end up living with four other people, like housemates. But I wonder though, with this, and like again, I love talking generations, but then we fall into these different traps. One of my first thoughts in looking at this article is how how is it varied or is it varied? Is there any variance um, between socioeconomic status? Because I can see someone who comes from an upper class, upper middle class, solid middle class family being able to do this. I do not know of too many people who would be working class in poverty or lower middle class who would have in a way this is a bit of a luxury, right? Because if you're not providing your own housing, you're not providing your own food, you're not providing your own medical care,
Yeah.
somebody is.
Yes.
And so I can't imagine someone from a single parent home coming from for example, um, my mom, yes, and because it was the 80s, she could buy a house. She then lost the house, but that's another story. But she raised us in this house. Her goal was to get us out of the house at age 18 to take care of
Yeah,
ourselves so that she could downsize because she was
for sure.
hanging on by a thread
Yeah.
trying to give us a decent childhood. Um, and I would venture to guess a lot of other working class and individuals who grew up in poverty, same situation. Or if you're growing up in a crowded apartment, or as soon as you turn 18, you need to move out, or as soon as you graduate from high school, you need to move out because grandma needs to move in because we need to take care of grandma. I I I see this a bit as a luxury. I would have even today, if I were graduating high school today, I would not have the luxury of staying at home because my mom could not afford to have me stay at home unless I worked full time. My
Yeah.
mom couldn't afford to keep me at home when I was in high school. I paid for everything for myself in high school. I worked 30 plus hours a week, even during the school year, and paid for my own stuff in high school. So I see this as, another um, just delineation of we got quite a few other factors going on here. And one is that SES,
Yeah.
that
I think that's
socioeconomic
fair.
status.
I think the thing that may also play into this, and they mentioned this in the article, is the mental health side of it. They make a comment here about
Oh,
that unemployment
yes.
among youth is rising, but their mental health is in decline. And they list three things that they consider common mental disorders in more than a third of 18 to 24-year-olds. And these are not things we used to think of as mental disorders. You and I, when we grew up, these were not stress and anxiety and depression. Now, depression, yes, we would have thought of as a disorder to some extent, but the stress and anxiety we would probably not have thought of that way as Gen Xers growing up. But
Well,
these things I think are coming from their ability to look at all of it and think, I mean, we've talked about before, like at that age, the world was supposed to be what our oyster, I think is what we used to call it.
yeah.
They're looking at it and going, this is my manure pit, right? This is what I have. There's nothing else. Like, what am I going to be able to do here? Of course, that's going to make them stressed. That's going to make them anxious. That usually leads to depressive symptoms. They're taking
Well,
more sick leave than their Gen X counterparts.
and
Of
one
course they
thing
are.
I haven't seen any articles, thank goodness. But I hope we don't see an uptick in deaths of despair among this population. It's been, I know even like a decade or so ago, along the lines of white working class males, the deaths of despair were rapidly increasing because they were kind of facing the same kind of thing. So it was becoming a bit of a trend. And I'm using deaths of despair instead of another phrase,
Yeah,
which is it's two of the
yeah.
same thing. Um, but YouTube, uh, because we got
YouTube.
to be mindful of YouTube.
We're gonna call it YouTube
Um,
from now on. YouTube.
but we I do worry about some of these outcomes and the mortality rates and things because it's not improving, and the fact that it's global means I don't know because I mean I remember like growing up and stuff and like okay my understanding of economics is very very limited, but it always used to be like the stock market, if it was down in the US it was higher globally and vice versa, but now everything is so intertwined that
Mhm.
they we can't even look at the larger picture is so bleak.
Well, and I think we don't necessarily discuss a lot of politics on here, but currently, if you look at some of the data coming out politically, you'll see a diversion, or divergence is the word I should use here, that young women in this category, if like is it Gen Alpha and Gen Z then? Gen Alpha is the one coming up behind Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
Um, women are becoming significantly more liberal, and young men are starting to trend more conservative. And
Oh,
part of
yes,
it
I've
seems to
seen
be
that.
somewhat related to the economic reality that they are going to struggle to provide for a family, right? They're going to struggle to be able to find someone to partner up with and build a life with. And that is causing, I think, some shift. And I think we're starting to see that somewhat play out in even some of the like electoral patterns where younger men are
Well,
shifting a different direction because they're angry at people who they think are taking jobs away from them. And this is
well,
global. This isn't just in the
and
United States, it's global.
and with that, we have an issue in higher ed where we're losing young men.
Yeah,
We just are not, and not even the young men. We're just losing men. Um, and so that I think plays into then going into that conservative more mindset and the anger and everything else. They are, I mean, even in the trades. So when you even when you think about like even some of the traditional, okay, maybe he's not quote unquote college boy material, but he's gonna go get some schooling and become a plumber or an electrician. Or
yeah.
no, we're not even getting any people in trades.
Hmm.
We're losing men in trades even. So there's, I don't
Do
know. And that makes me wonder then what are some of the overall messages that we are sending to our men and especially our young men?
yeah,
What messages are going out there? Um, and maybe it is just a time of transition where the power balances are going to change and it may become more matriarchal. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know, but
I mean, the
it's
article
something.
actually does mention that this surprised me. The hottest roles right now among Gen Z grads are in teaching, where the pay is low, but it's balanced with weeks of vacation. Um,
I wonder how long they're going to stick with that.
yeah, I don't know. Like
Although,
I taught for a few years, and the weeks of vacation were not enough. I mean, I remember I probably averaged 50 to 60 hours a week, and I got
yeah,
paid for 40 if I was lucky. But the other thing they mentioned that I think is interesting, and it kind of goes to the point you just made, is that non-graduate, right, non-graduate Gen Zers are going into the trade jobs in record numbers. And
okay, that's
they're
good.
if you see them talking about it on TikTok, which I do once in a while, and they're like, why would I go get all that debt? Why would I do that when I could spend a year like one of T's nephews, right, graduated 2 years ago, I feel like. Yeah, 2 years
Well,
ago. He's waiting to get into an electrician
there,
trade, like a union
there,
that will
yeah,
train him and apprentice him as an
there's an
electrician.
in, there is an increase in that in those non-traditional um, spaces because a lot of those, yes, you can do your well, it's an apprenticeship.
Yes, for a couple years.
Apprentice Apprenticeships are growing. And unfortunately, those were ignored for years and years and years. And then also just some of these different things, these stackable credentials and stuff like that. People are kind of going in and doing piecemeal, which is fun because I fully prescribe to the belief that it's lifelong and life wide learning. Like it's more important to always be learning new things than to
Yeah,
rest on your laurels on what you think you know or what you have your credentials in. Um, and I say this with our audience as they look at a yellow screen that, um, has nothing because I'm the editor. I'm learning editing skills, broadening my
Yeah.
skill set. Probably make more money off of that eventually than I will off of anything else I've ever done. But I just, I really feel for the younger generation. And I wish I had some kind of like platitude to just, even be like, oh, everything will be okay. I don't know. I don't know if everything will be okay. Um, and the pathway is not clear. And now we're at the point where as the baby boomers are, they're going to get old, they're going to die whether they want to or not. Now we've got how many generations bucking up against you know
It's a it's like a
and
clogged
so
dam.
it is because, and then the resources that are released aren't going to be enough for everybody. The resources and opportunities aren't going to be enough for everybody because they've held on too too long. Does that make sense? I mean, like there's
Yeah.
just too many. Oh, we're the generation behind, and our average age now is like 50,
Yeah.
which should never be. Um, but it
But
is.
unfortunately, we're like the boomers in that sense. We're going to die someday too, right? So we have to get there at some point. We don't want to
Well,
admit it, but we're marching that direction.
I don't know the way I'm going. I'll probably be dead before a lot of the boomers. And I'm thinking like when you were talking about roommates and stuff, and it's like I don't know if you and your T really know like you guys are like plan A for being my roomies when I get older. like like I'm
The
I'm gonna
inexorable
be
march of
really
time.
I'm going to be moving into the spare bedroom. I'll just live out of my suitcase and I'll get a pod or something or and storage unit and me and my dogs will just move in with you guys and we'll just have to yeah, you're gonna have roommates whether you want it or not because that's how we're
I
gonna
mean,
have to survive.
everybody has to adapt, right? I think that's the reality is we're struggling with the adaptation to the reality, which gives us an awful lot to complain about. They have looked at it and said, there's just no point, right? We're trying to adapt. They're trying to adapt the world to them. Like I think they're looking at it differently. And I think we can learn something from them a little bit and how they're doing it. Cause
Well,
I wish somebody
I
would have been better equipped to tell us back then we didn't
I
need $200,000 in education debt to survive. Like that didn't need to be a thing, but we were all kind of promised we were going to have this successful career when we were done. That was the ticket. You didn't need to worry
yes.
about. I remember thinking when I would sign my financial aid package every year, God, this is a lot of money, but it's not going to matter because I'm going to have a great
Right.
job.
It
And
doesn't seem, yeah.
it's weird how it sounds like really grandiose and somewhat what's the word I want to use here? Manic thinking, but it's what we were
Oh,
told.
I don't know about manic. I think magical thinking would
It was
be,
very magical thinking. Yes.
but I think as you were just talking now, I I feel and I feel kind of personally I feel resentful because in this sense I don't feel like it was ever our day. But I also as this younger generation as they're sorting things out for themselves and deciding what they're going to do and how they're going to do it really they are the future. I'm not anymore. Like I will exist into the future, but my impact on the world um, is very, very small. I'm turning into your invisible middle-aged woman, which is fine. Takes a lot of pressure off me. But I really think if we want to serve these younger generations, we really need to kind of step aside and let them set the tone for themselves. And I think we were not allowed that. But I think
No,
that's kind of what we're seeing here is, and they need that. They they need that. This is the group that I think is going to be like, yeah, no, we're going to be redoing some stuff, just like the boomers did. But
yeah,
and but this is the generation, and they need our support. And like, no, you know what? I mean, I'm going to be checking out probably in the next 30 years. Some of these people are still going to be having babies in the next 25, 30 years. They are the future.
yeah.
And so let them do with it what they wish. Because you know what? I really don't have anything to brag about for what we've done or what our parents or our grandparents have done to make things better for these kids. So, you know, my vote is let's step aside and let them let them see
I
if
mean,
they can find a better way.
basically do for them what boomers did not do for us.
Right. Like let's try something different instead of, we've tried nothing and now we're all out of ideas or we
Yeah,
force fed our beliefs. Because yeah, I mean I got nothing, and as I talk with my mentee and things, and it's like I find myself so much not like I can't feed her the same lines that were fed to me,
right.
because she figured out it was a bunch of crap long before I ever did. And
Well, I think
it's
I think they just have they have, and I think that's why this it's why this article just kind of initially when you see it, you think lazy. What is your problem? Get out there and work. And then you realize you were talking like your parents would have,
yeah,
probably even your
right.
grandparents would have. And we thought we had motivation to work. We did not and could not see that we didn't. And I think part of that is internet based, right? They have the ability now to see so much more across the spectrum
Or
than we ever could have. I mean,
yeah,
we're still from the generation who had to go into the library and literally like look through a card catalog and then go find what you need off a shelf, sometimes have it ordered for you because it wasn't in the library, so that you could work
mhm,
on your papers or your research or whatever. And these guys can access almost anything at the touch of a button. So I'm a little jealous of them for that, but I'm also a little jealous of them for the fact that they can see, can I swear yet? They can see the BS
yeah,
for what it is. They can see the BS that we couldn't see. And
right,
we unfortunately, my hope is that they can figure out how to turn it around so that they're a generation that does better than their parents, because we're just as Gen X generally we're screwed. And somebody said the other day, why have we never had a Generation X president? And I thought for a second, wasn't Obama Gen X? But he's not, right? He
I
was born in
he's not.
1961.
Yeah, he's a baby boomer. um I will say though, I am glad, and I think we've done a good job with, at least these kids can voice it. They can
Yes.
voice these things, and they can demonstrate these, they can physically say, nope, I'm not, I choose not to participate. I choose not to do this. But at the end of the day, it's still breaks my heart. And even though I'm not a parent, I still play whatever role it is I play in society. I'm still part of society. I'm still part
Yeah.
of what messages are we sending? What um what are things that I could have done or that I could start doing a bit differently um to to support these young individuals, and what inspiration can I take from them, and looking at how do I carve out this next phase of my life. And it circles back to like I was talking earlier, maybe it is doing different things and carving out my own little path instead of trying to get myself pigeonholed into a role and being ensnared in that particular role. Maybe that isn't my path.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how as we come full circle on the conversation, we go from being slightly annoyed by them to being somewhat impressed by them and also a
Right.
little bit envious of their FAFAO attitude. I mean, we are the original FAFO generation, right? But this is a different level, and maybe we can learn something from them in that regard. My hope for them, honestly, at this point is that they have the numbers to do this in a way that nobody else does, no other demographic does.
Right.
They're going to have to organize like crazy from a political standpoint, run for offices up and down, state level, local level, federal level, whatever. And they're going to have to be exactly who they are to do it. Right? Like I think they can we're never going to be able to make the changes that need to be made just because of where we are at this point. They can come
Mhm.
in and just be like, nope, we're just going to wipe this all away. We're going to start this all over. That may be our hope. We may see it, we may not. I don't know. But they're the only people who can change it because Generation X is just kind of like, you know what? We've been in the background. We're probably just going to stay in the background. You probably don't want one of
We're,
us as president anyway, because
we're, well,
we may
and
not be so
now
good at that.
this Gen Xer's just, she's perimenopausal. She's getting cranky. I always was moody. But yeah, but hey, I'm happy to support the kids, and you know, they need to protest. If they need, if they decide to start the revolution, I hope I'm young enough to, at least
Drive.
help.
You'll drive the
Maybe
minivan.
I'll drive the minivan. Either that, or maybe I'll be like, oh, who was the character in A Tale of Two Cities? Who just, I think she ended up being a villain, but she would knit names or crochet names. Like, I'm going to be her, Madame Defarge, I think she was. Or,
Sounds right.
like, I'll make everybody some soup or something.
Right.
My, you know, have you, I'll go out and feed everybody. Have you had enough to eat today? Let me make you a sandwich.
Yep.
Make sure you drink some water. So I'll be like, like the mom. Yeah. And I'll take my minivan and you know,
That's fair.
yeah.
I think it's
But
kind of
man,
I think the whole thing is going to spawn even more discussion. Because I mean it's just getting started, right? Like
I,
their impact is just gonna get going. And
I,
I don't really blame them for not wanting to be a cog in the machine when there's
and I
literally
hope,
nothing specific payout wise. There's no benefit
but
here.
I hope they're feeling a sense of empowerment in doing it instead of a
Yes.
sense of defeat. And
Yes.
I think that's the key right there. Is it giving up, or is it, nope, I'm drawing a line in the sand? And maybe it's a little bit of both, but I hope it's out of that sense of empowerment.
And that's maybe where our generation comes in, is to try to help empower them to take that and run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well.
So,
Interesting discussion. I mean, we're always
um,
always curious to hear what our listeners think about it.
we we are, and I'm always kind of sad after talking about the younger generations. Like, I go in thinking I'm going to beat them up, and then I'm like, these poor babies. These poor babies.
Yes. Wasn't quite where I expected us to end up, but this is what happens when we get going is by the time we talk through all of the reality and the complexity, it's not ever really as straightforward as we thought it was at the beginning.
No, no,
And
it's
that
not.
is sort of the benefit of our undergraduate education.
Yeah, goody for us. So,
Yeah.
but yes, I agree. And you tried to close this out. So, do you want to finish closing us out? And I will keep my mouth shut and turn it
That's
over to our
I
audience.
was just saying, like, we've said quite a bit. So anything we're obviously wanting to hear from listeners as to what your thoughts are on what's happening, how you think we can be supportive, or what we maybe need to do to be helpful, or if we just need to get out of the way. Be sure to like and subscribe, share with your friends, and as always, check back with us next time for something new to complain about. It's been great.
Always, always. And we will see everybody soon. Be good.
Definitely. Take care.